There. Today's the 5th of April, so it's the release day of my short story collection, Diabolical Dreamscapes. This is the hardcover version, which I got from Ingram Spark. I'm really pleased with this, as you can see here. It has a dust jacket and it's cloth bound, so I do recommend Ingram Spark if you're doing any hardcovers. I'm going to read you the back cover blurb, and then I'll read you some excerpts from the short stories, most of which were previously published in magazines in the UK, US and elsewhere worldwide. So, Diabolical Dreamscapes, strange and macabre short stories. Reader beware. From the hallucinatory imagination of Leilani Stewart, author of award-winning ghost horror novel The Blue Man, comes 21 previously published short stories and flash fiction, now entombed between the covers of a new darkly themed collection. In part 1, Dark and Surreal Tales of Death, corpses find new purposes in death while fated to walk the earth, and surreal journeys of the afterlife abound, involving trips to far-reaching corners of the earth, the moon, or Venus during the last throes of life. In part 2, strange and hallucinatory stories of the mind, cats, rabbits, dogs, birds and spiders have a role to play in these dreamlike journeys through the mind, helping the characters of each tale unravel their fears and anxiety while facing their darkness, depression and demons. Okay, so I'm going to read you the first page of the first short story. This one is called Elsie's Eternal Eden, and it was first published in the Crazy Oik magazine in 2012, winter 2012. Elsie dug deep into the soil with her trowel, her wrinkled hand turning white with her grip on the handle. The potato was starting to come loose. She wedged the trowel in further, and it popped up in a shower of earth, along with several strands of black hair. Her eyes widened behind her large spectacles. Transfixed, she pulled on a clump of hair, bringing up a scrap of grey-green skin attached to it. She shook the hair from her hand and looked down at the potato, which was full and round, about the size of a cantaloupe. The tuber had been feeding on the decaying remains the whole time. Elsie thought back to when she planted the potato seeds in late May, and she had moved into the house in March, so the person, probably a woman judging by the long hair, had been buried since before then. But fairly recently, since there was still some flesh remaining. Maybe it was the body of the previous owner. Though why would someone be buried in their back garden? She hadn't heard anything about a murder or a strange disappearance in town. It was a peaceful, suburban neighbourhood. Okay, so that's Elsie's Eternal Eden. Okay, next short story. This one is called The London Plane, and it was first published in Monomyth magazine, and this was, I believe, in 2010. The London Plane. Gladys put both hands on the tree and pulled herself up from the ground. She could see the waning moon through the bare branches. The sky was indigo blue, her favourite colour. The great artist had painted it all for her. She felt it. I was here before. I touched this tree once, under a tranquil sky. Her knees were still bleeding. She could see grit and fragments of leaves stuck to the grazed flesh. There was nothing she could do for it now. More important things mattered, like finding out how to get home. She could feel the bark cracked and dry beneath her splayed fingers. As she stepped back, she let go of the trunk and looked at the medley of colours, brown, red, yellow like flax. There was a tree exactly like it outside her apartment back in England. A London plane, a beautiful tree, her favourite. She loved how they shed their outer bark in layers to reveal a multitude of colours beneath, a divine way to rid themselves of pollution. Okay, going to stop there. Third short story is Till Death Do Us Bonaparte, and this one was first published in Dark Gothic Resurrected magazine in summer 2017. Bastet lay on the floor. She didn't recall how she'd got there, nor did she know why there was broken glass all around her. All she knew was that she was entirely wrapped from neck to foot in swaddling. She tried to move, but her front legs were strapped tight along the front of her body. She wanted to kick out with her powerful hind legs, but they too were tied down. What about her tail? Could she maneuver it enough to pierce a hole in the bandages? No. There was nothing for it. She'd have to summon her divine powers. What was the use in being a cat deity if she couldn't work some magic? Fair enough. She had her current bondage to contend with, but she had to try something. Hold on, it was all coming back to her now. A dry, sandy place. A sealed room where she'd lain in darkness for what felt like an eternity. A man, young and handsome and bold. Loving hands placed her yes. She remembered clear as day, a wooden crate. And then, a rocking motion and the sound of sea. A strange noise followed, a whir and a groan, unfamiliar to her, accompanied by an incessant chugging motion. Okay, going to stop that story there. And the next one I'll read to you, first page of The Woman in the Stiff. And this one was first published in Blood Moon Rising magazine in 2009. So that was my very first published short story. What a salubrious day. I said, what a salubrious day. Would you care to vum me a cigarette? In the egg yolk glow of sunset, a man stood admiring his stark silhouette. Even though it was drawn out by the evening, it still looked a hell of a lot beefier than his meagre frame. The woman in front of him looked up with a frown as his shadow passed over her. You mean bum, she said. He sat down next to her on the metal bench. Usually I don't talk to strangers, he said, but I must say I've had a life-altering experience and I see things a lot differently now. She gave him a cigarette and offered a light, hoping he wouldn't try to continue the conversation. Her book was getting to an interesting part, but as the tip of his cigarette began to glow, she found her head turning. Able to resist it no longer, her eyes travelled up the length of the rolled tobacco towards his mouth. His lips were shriveled, curled back from his teeth. Brown, decayed gums were exposed, and a row of rotting logs that would give a dentist a field day. Okay, gonna stop reading there. And now on to part 2. So the book is divided into 2 parts, as it says on the back blurb. So I'll read you one from the second half, and these stories are a bit more surreal and hallucinatory. This one is called The White Kaleidoscope, and this one was first published in Carillon magazine in 2010. I was 15 years old when I was first struck with the desire to eat church candles. The notion swept over me as I slaved away at the till in the department store where I worked every Saturday for a paltry £1.50 an hour. When I say church candles, I'm talking about a very specific breed. The big, thick, creamy, delicious-looking kind that look like squat marzipan tree trunks. I'm not pregnant nor deranged. At least I wasn't the last time I psychoanalyzed myself. I've always craved unusual objects. In fact, now that I think of it, my adventuresome palate has landed me in trouble once or twice in the past. Once, being when I masticated the yummy-looking psychedelic balls of wool in the dusty classroom cupboard in my nursery school. Twice being when I chewed my mum's favourite pair of red leather stilettos. In hindsight, it's a bit strange that my pleasant, straight-laced, obey-all-the-rules mother had such incriminating shoes hidden in a brown paper bag in the cupboard in the first place. Okay, and another short story. So the first page of Arachnid of Life, and this one was first published in Sarasvati magazine in the UK. That was in, I think it was 2011. Life is complex. I sometimes think of it as a spider web, of how the interconnecting silk is like one problem leading into another. But in such a network, what is the best way to break free of these restraints? Flexibility, adaptability. I consider myself a student of life. Not a student like the one in the story I'm about to tell you, but someone who's flexible, like the legs of a spider working its web. How easily a student can fall prey to a bigger predator in the pathways that life creates. I'd like to tell you about an 8-year-old boy, a small, mousy-haired boy, staring across a table at his support worker. The wooden tabletop was strewn with the torn remains of a white envelope and its shredded contents. At the centre of the table stood a leafy bromeliad, and I sat behind it, watching adult and child on either side. As I listened to their chat, I watched a minute spider on the bromeliad, and so the web began. There was too much mail in the letterbox. Okay, that's the bottom of the page, so it's a bit of an awkward place to stop, but I'll stop there and read you the next story, which is Fear of the Mold. This one was published in Indian Pure Slush magazine, which I think is based in Australia. I'm not sure what was the year on that one, off the top of my head. Fear of the mold is the Indian fear of fear itself. Fear is the smell of decay, a worry that the mold will catch up with you, that the spores of the old place will infest the new. Is everything polluted, contaminated? Fear is that spreading sewage behind the walls, the brown speckled patterns on whitewash walls. Only this time, it's in you. And even though you cleaned the four walls that boxed you in, even though you scrubbed them with a sponge and bleach, you fear the rot has already set in and will come back. You've moved on, run away, but you haven't escaped. You can smell the mold in your clothes and hair. Yet it doesn't taint those around you, only you. The four walls of the new courtyard should give you safety, but they don't. You're alone with the fear. It has desensitized you. All the smells in this new place are unfamiliar, and so you feel detached, alien. You cook, you spray air freshener, but you can't shake off the old damp smell of lingering, festering evil, underlying it all. Okay, gonna stop there. The last story I'll read to you then. First page of Homeostasis. This is towards the end of the book. It was first published winter 2012-2013 in a magazine called Ariadne's Thread, and that's based in the UK. When I awoke from my hibernation after the longest winter my soul has ever known, I found myself floating in a deep pool. Although my body drifted free on the surface and I had all the room I wanted to stretch, my limbs, my neck and shoulders remained tensed. My muscles stayed clamped as though I were confined in the narrow space of a bathtub rather than in a spacious pool. As my body rotated in the water, I could see bushes of deadly nightshade hanging over the edge of the pool, their purple heads oriented in a way that sent intoxicating perfume all over me. Belladonna, a filter of death. The scent diffused the tension in my body, and I felt myself succumb to the overpowering aroma. My multifidus loosened its bindweed-like grip from my spine, and I sailed, detached, across the pool. Each muscle unleashed its store of lactic acid, and I sensed my body melt into the cool water. I could feel myself disintegrate limb by limb, vertebra by vertebra, atom by atom, and reform in the water. I craned my neck. Looking down the length of my body, I noticed I was naked. My pale body looked stark against the dark pool. Okay, gonna stop there. So, as I say, this is the hardcover. It's available for $14.99 from Amazon, Waterstones, Barnes & Noble, Foyles, a few other bookstores. The paperback is $7.99. I don't have a copy with me at the minute. And it's available on Kindle Unlimited for free if you have a subscription. Or it's £1.77, which I think is $2.99. Thanks for listening, and I hope you might head over and grab yourself a copy. Bye.